You've probably heard of this book, Attached by Dr. Amir Levine. It's gotten a lot of traction on social media in the past couple of years, and it's almost gone to the point where it's almost hard to find a self-help guru these days who hasn't mentioned this book or who's not talking about attachment styles. As a therapist, I find this rise in popularity and interest in attachment styles both very exciting and very concerning. Let me tell you why. At this point, I have spent years in school, hours in trainings and reading books and academic papers on attachment theory, and most importantly, sitting with people one-on-one every week in attachment-based therapy. I am an attachment theory nerd, and so I love that people are getting more interested in attachment theory and are wanting to use it to have better relationships. The problem is that when a topic gets so popular, especially a topic as complex and nuanced as attachment theory, it's basically guaranteed to get diluted or misconstrued along the way, especially when there are so many unqualified people on social media going viral for their 15-second videos on signs you're dating an avoidant, or signs you have an anxious attachment style, or how to heal your attachment style with no further context. A lot of the stuff I've come across on social media just irks me. The vast majority is an oversimplification at best and harmful at worst, and I am genuinely concerned that people are unintentionally sabotaging their relationships because of something about attachment styles that they saw on social media. Even Attach, which has come to be seen as this ultimate resource. Yes, it is a great book, but it is still pop psychology, and it's definitely not the whole picture. I want the best for you all, and I want you to be able to experience how life-changing it is to have an accurate understanding of attachment theory. And I know that my viewers are intelligent, critical thinkers who care about being informed and who care about improving their relationships and their lives. And so I wanted to bring to you a 3-part video series giving you the truth about attachment styles. My goal for this series is for you to be able to walk away with the facts and for you to have the most comprehensive understanding of attachment theory that you need to struggle less in your relationships and have healthier relationships overall. Also, so that if you come across anything else on attachment theory, whether that be a podcast or a TikTok or an article, I want you to not be affected by any harmful misinformation being thrown around out there. So this first video is going to cover everything you need to know about attachment theory. I promise to make it interesting and useful for you and the least like a boring first year psych class as possible. And by the end of this video, I hope that we can all walk away with some answers to those really difficult questions, like why we're attracted to certain people, or why our past relationships have failed, why we continue to find ourselves in the same unhealthy relationship patterns over and over again, why we react the way that we do to certain triggers. Also, I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite attachment styles quiz that you can use to find out your attachment style. This is the most accurate one I found out there, and I really had to sift through a lot of BuzzFeedy, what bread are you type quizzes to find this one. And next week in video 2 is where it's gonna get juicy. We are going to be going over the 4 most common lies about attachment styles out there that you really need to look out for. And finally, in video 3, we are going to be going over how we can apply all of this new knowledge we now have on attachment theory to our own lives to feel more secure in ourselves and our relationships and have happier, healthier relationships overall. I'm pumped. I hope you are too. Let's start with the basics. What is attachment theory? If you strip it down to its core, attachment theory essentially says that our earliest relationship with our primary caregiver when we were infants, which for most of us was our mother, serves as the template for our relationships for the rest of our life. And this template is what we call our attachment style. There are 4 different attachment styles, and we are going to be going over them soon. But first, I think it is useful to talk a bit about where attachment theory even came from. Attachment theory exists thanks to a British psychoanalyst named John John Bowlby. And Bowlby's whole thing in the 1950s was that he believed that we are all born with an innate tendency to attach to our primary caregiver. Why? Because without this tendency, we would die. Who else would take care of our basic needs? We can't do that for ourselves as literal infants. And so we had to develop this tendency to attach to our caregiver as a survival mechanism. These basic needs of ours as a baby include our physical needs for food and shelter, and it also includes our emotional need for love, because yes, love is a fundamental thing we need to survive. Now, Bowlby believed that based on how good or how not good our caregiver was at responding to our needs as a baby, we developed different coping strategies to deal with our particular caregiver. And this set of coping strategies makes up our attachment style. So if our caregiver was consistently responsive to our needs, we come to learn to trust that our caregiver is going to protect us and take care of us. If, on the other hand, our caregiver was not consistent or not at all responsive to our needs, then we adapt. Either we get louder and cling on to our caregiver to try to get their attention to get our needs met, or we distance ourselves from them because we've learned that we can't rely on them to meet our needs. Now, all these interactions that we have with our caregiver, whether they're positive ones that gave us safety or comfort, or negative ones that gave us distress, add up to shape our beliefs about ourselves and about relationships. As babies, we already have an idea of whether we're worthy of love, whether other people are reliable and can be trusted. And then these same beliefs that we formed as babies follow us as we grow into adults, and we continue to run our adult relationships based on those same beliefs. This shaping of our beliefs has actually been proven to happen on a cellular level. Attachment theory is one of the most well-established branches of psychology, and it has a pretty solid body of neuroscience research to back it up. And this is actually something I learned from an Andrew Huberman podcast. Obviously, Andrew Huberman is the ultimate authority when it comes to neuroscience, but what he explains is that the interactions that we have with our caregiver when we're babies shape the neurons of our little developing brains, and specifically in the brain areas that are responsible for attachment. And then because our childhood attachments serve the same purpose as our adult attachments to meet our fundamental needs for safety and love, we end up repurposing those same neuronal changes that happened in childhood in our adult attachments in romantic relationships. Our childhood attachment styles has been shown to be a very good predictor of our adult attachment styles. And one of the trainings I did said that there is a 68 to 75% correspondence between our childhood and our adult attachment styles. And this makes sense to me based on the people that I've worked with and the people that I know very well in my life. For the most part, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense why you are the way you are. Now, let's talk about the 4 different attachment styles. This is where it gets spicy. The 4 attachment styles really came to be in the 1970s thanks to a psychologist named Mary Ainsworth. She wanted to expand on Bowlby's work, and she wanted to study how a child's attachment to their mother varies from child to child. And so to study this, she created a lab condition called the strange situation. The strange situation was essentially a room with some toys in it and a stranger who was an actor that was part of the experiment. It wasn't just some rando off the street. And she invited mothers and their babies who were between 12 and 18 months into this strange situation room. She then allowed mom and baby to play with the toys, talk to the stranger, and then at some point, mom would be instructed to leave the room and leave the baby in the room with the toys and the stranger. This is where Mary Ainsworth made her first point of observation, which was, how did the babies react to their mom leaving? Did they cry? Did they not care? In the second part of the experiment, mom was instructed to come back into the room, and this is where Mary Ainsworth made her second point of observation, which was, how did the babies react to their mom coming back? Were they happy to see them? Were they upset at them? Or were they just kind of ambivalent? By the end of the experiment, Mary Ainsworth discovered 4 distinct patterns of reactions in the babies to their mom leaving and then coming back. And today we know these 4 different patterns as the 4 attachment styles. So let's go through them all together, what the 4 attachment styles look like in babies, and then how they look like in adults. I know this is the part you guys have all been waiting for. First, let's talk about the secure attachment style. About 50% of the world's population has a secure attachment style. In the strange situation, when mom left, the secure babies were visibly upset. They were crying, but then when mom came back, they stopped crying and mom comforted them, and then when they felt better and safe again, they went back to exploring and playing with the toys. These babies came to be securely attached because their mom had been consistently available to them and responsive to their needs, and so they have come to see mom as a source of safety and comfort, and they've learned to trust that mom will take care of them. These babies also tend to have a positive sense of self, and they see themselves as lovable and worthy thanks to mom consistently loving them and meeting their needs. When these babies grow up to be adults, they become the ideal partner. They are comfortable with closeness and intimacy, and they value having close relationships in their lives, and so they make time for them and prioritize them. They are reliable, consistent, trustworthy, loving, caring. They're empathetic and responsive to their partner's feelings and needs. And they're also very good at communicating their own feelings and needs. Overall, they are good communicators, which also means that they are good at resolving conflict. When they have a disagreement with their partner, which is inevitable in any relationship, they are able to be mentally flexible and be open to different perspectives and even be open to reconsidering their own. They don't feel threatened by conflict, that it's going to lead to the end of the relationship. And really, they don't really worry much at all about losing the relationship because they don't see a very high possibility of that even happening. They turn to their partner for support and comfort when they're stressed, and they expect that their partner is going to be responsive to them and give them the support and love that they're seeking. But they are also able to regulate their stress on their own. They are very comfortable spending time alone and being apart from their partner for long periods of time. Now, this doesn't mean that they don't like being apart from their partner for long periods of time, but they don't lose the ability to function or anything. Generally, they have a good sense of self-worth and they know that they're worthy of love. So basically, if your caregivers were consistently loving and attentive to you as a baby, you will have a much easier time forming and maintaining healthy, stable, lasting relationships as an adult. And the research supports this. Securely attached people are shown to be more likely to be in long-term relationships and have higher levels of relationship satisfaction. Basically, secure attachment is goals: being securely attached and being with someone who is securely attached. Now, let's talk about our babies with an anxious, preoccupied attachment style. People with this attachment style make up about 20% of the world's population. In the strange situation, anxious, preoccupied babies cried when their mom left, but they also continued to cry when mom came back. They were very difficult to soothe, and they tended to cling to their mom, and they didn't go back to exploring and playing with the toys. These babies came to be this way because their mom had been unpredictable and inconsistent at meeting their needs. Sometimes she was there, but sometimes she wasn't. And so these babies grow to crave closeness, but they also grow to not fully trust that their mom is going to give them the care and nurturance that they need. These babies worry that their needs aren't going to get met, and so they cling to their mom as an adaptation to try to get their needs met. But because they are so focused on trying to get their mom's attention, they often don't develop the independence and confidence that they need to explore new environments. When these anxious, preoccupied babies grow up to be adults, they still crave closeness and they still have a tendency to cling, but now to their romantic partner. And whenever they're apart from their romantic partner, they might feel very anxious and they might think about their partner nonstop until they come back together again. They tend to be quite dependent on others for their sense of self because deep down they might not have a strong sense of self, and they might not believe that they're good enough on their own, and so they might fear being alone. They might even have thoughts like, without my partner or without my partner's love, who would I be? What would there be left? And these thoughts might lead them to put their partner on a pedestal and to see themselves as less than compared to their partner. They see the relationship as fragile and something that could end at any moment. And this terrifies them because they might see their current partner as their only chance at love, and therefore they must hold on to this person at all costs. They might try to do anything and go to great lengths to avoid losing this person and to try to get their approval, and often this does lead to people-pleasing tendencies. And because they're so afraid of losing this person, they might be hypersensitive to any signs that their partner's not available or consistent or interested, basically any signs that their partner might abandon them. And this might lead them to often misinterpret their partner's actions. Now, when someone with an anxious, preoccupied attachment style detects any threat of abandonment, they might act in ways to try to get their partner's attention, because they might have this belief that they need to be very loud and make their needs so obvious that there's no way that their partner could ignore them. And so they might call and text a lot, or they might stonewall their partner and ignore their calls and texts to make a point, like, that'll show them. They might even threaten to leave or try to make their partner jealous on purpose. And even though these behaviors might be successful in getting their partner's attention, often they do the exact opposite of what they were intending to do to begin with, which was to pull their partner closer, and they often end up driving their partner away. Next, we have our avoidant dismissive babies. About 25% of the world's population has an avoidant dismissive attachment style. In the strange situation, these babies didn't really have much of a reaction when their mom left or when she came back, and overall they just kind of ignored or avoided their mom in general. Interestingly though, even though these babies didn't show distress on the outside when their moms left, the researchers could still tell that they were in physical distress because they were also measuring things like their heart rate and other stress markers, and all of these markers increased when their mom left, which gave away how they truly felt and that they were just hiding their true feelings. So how did these babies come to be this way? Typically, caregivers of babies with an avoidant dismissive attachment style were not very responsive to their baby's needs at all. And maybe they were even hostile or told their baby to stop crying or just rejected them and acted indifferent. And what these babies learn from this constant rejection of their needs is that they can't rely on their caregiver to take care of them. And so instead, they learn to bottle up and deny their needs and avoid interacting with their caregiver. On the outside, these babies look very independent, but really it's just because they've learned that they have to take care of themselves because their caregiver won't. These babies grow up to be the strong, independent types who don't need anything from anyone. They might not really value having close relationships in their life, and they can't rely on anyone anyways, right? They might also secretly think that they're better than everyone else because look how independent I am. That being said, even though on the outside they might not seem to care about relationships or that they don't need anyone, deep down they have a very strong need for closeness and intimacy. They might just be actively suppressing it because they fear being rejected and abandoned, so much so that they can't even afford to risk it. Often people with an avoidant dismissive attachment style are masters at suppressing their feelings and needs, and maybe even to the point where they might claim to be needless. They might use work and other activities they have going on as their means to avoid their feelings and need for relationships, and often you will find that these individuals are very immersed in their work and their hobbies, and often they are very successful in both areas. Now, if someone with an avoidant dismissive attachment style ever does get romantically involved with someone, because they are so afraid of relying on other people and losing their independence, they might have a tendency to pull away when things start to get serious, because that amount of closeness is just way too uncomfortable for them, and they might even feel suffocated by it. And this is when they might tell their partner things like, I'm not ready to commit, I can't see you right now because work is too busy, I need some space. However, deep down, the real reason why they might be pulling away might be because they really like this person, which makes them even more scared that they're going to reject them. And so they reject them first to protect themselves. And to be able to get to the point where they can reject someone they really like, they might have suppressed their feelings for the person and convinced themselves that they didn't like them. And they might have done this by putting more focus on something that they didn't like about the person and then making that as an excuse to end the relationship, even if it was something small and insignificant, like I didn't like their shoes. And if someone with an avoidant dismissive attachment style ever does get into a relationship, they might often fantasize about how much happier they would be if they were single. And finally, we have the fourth attachment style, disorganized. I like to think of this one as the forgotten attachment style because it's not often talked about in the mainstream discourse, and attached really doesn't cover it much at all. Even though it is the rarest attachment style, it makes up about 5% of the world's population, it still exists and it's still really important to understand. Disorganized attachment was actually discovered later in the 1980s by Mary Main, who was a student of Mary Ainsworth. So in the strange situation, babies with a disorganized attachment style didn't really have one consistent reaction to their mom leaving or coming back. Sometimes they would be angry at their mom when she came back. Other times they wouldn't seem to care, even though they were upset and crying when their mom left. Other times they might seem to get really tense and kind of constrain their body, as if it was almost like they didn't know how to react or what to do with themselves when their mom left or came back. So how do these babies come to be this way? Often, babies with a disorganized attachment style have experienced some sort of early severe trauma. Maybe they experienced a significant loss, or maybe their caregiver was abusive or neglectful, and maybe their caregiver was dealing with their own stuff or their own mental health stuff. These babies feel conflicted. On the one hand, they want to go to their caregiver for safety and comfort, but on the other hand, they're scared of them and they want to get away from them. And so they don't really have an organized or predictable way of coping. As adults, these babies grow up to have traits from both the anxious preoccupied and the avoidant dismissive attachment styles. And so they might really crave closeness, but also closeness might scare them because they see relationships as a source of danger where they could get hurt. And so they might have a tendency to push people away when they do get too close to the point where they might hurt them. They're often hyper vigilant to the possibility of getting hurt. And if they detect any threat that they could get hurt, they might have a very strong fight, flight, or freeze response. So they might react very aggressively, or they might just completely shut down. They might have quite a hard time regulating their emotions, and they might have really big mood swings, and they might act differently from day to day based on how they're feeling that day. And on the outside, this might look very erratic to someone else. In extreme cases, people with the disorganized attachment style can be easily triggered, and they might have flashbacks or dissociate if it gets to the point where their feelings are too overwhelming for them to handle. So those are the 4 attachment styles. If you think you have one of the insecure attachment styles, please don't go blaming your mom, okay? She was just doing the best she could with what she had at the time. If you're looking for something to blame, you can blame social media. And now we're at the point in the video where I want to share with you my favorite attachment styles quiz that you can use to figure out your attachment style. There are a lot of attachment style quizzes out there. I would be wary of the vast majority of them. Let me tell you why. First of all, a lot of these quizzes are on websites that have absolutely no business having an attachment style quiz on them. Like, please Tell me why BuzzFeed and WikiHow are allowed to have their own attachment style quizzes. Also, a lot of these quizzes do present your results assigning you with one attachment style, and that's not how attachment styles work. Attachment styles are not like Hogwarts houses. They're not these neat little categories where we either fit into one or the other. Attachment styles are more on a spectrum from low to high anxiety and low to high avoidance, and we could be any combination of these two traits. Which is why I'm such a fan of this specific quiz. It's on a website called traumasolutions.com. Great website name. I wish I had a company called traumasolutions.com. This quiz was designed by a psychologist named Dr. Diane Heller. She is an expert in attachment theory and trauma, and the reason why I like her quiz so much is because it presents your attachment style in this pie chart with 4 different sections for each of the 4 attachment styles, and then it tells you what percentage of each attachment style you have in your pie. And I guess you guys can see mine as an example. I guess that's fine. Seeing your attachment style laid out like this is gonna give you such a deeper understanding of yourself, and it's probably gonna explain a lot about your dating history. And I did want to touch on this a little bit in this video, and I wanted to bring your attention to the anxious-avoidant loop. I think this is going to be very helpful for you to understand, especially if you have one of the insecure attachment styles as your primary attachment style. If you're primarily anxious, you might find that you keep ending up with people with an avoidant attachment style. And vice versa, if you're primarily avoidant, you might find that you keep ending up with people with an anxious attachment style. This is a very common thing for people with an anxious attachment style and people with an avoidant attachment style to be attracted to each other. This pairing seems like it would make no sense. Like it seems like they would be each other's worst nightmare. But the reason they work so well together is because each confirms the other's beliefs and expectations that they already have about themselves and about relationships. So if you have an anxious attachment style, you might have this belief that partners in general will pull away and that you will need to chase them. Who better to reinforce that belief than someone with an avoidant attachment style? If you have an avoidant attachment style, you might have a belief that relationships threaten your independence. There's no one better for the role of reinforcing that belief and your need for independence than someone with an anxious attachment style. These relationships often have this constant push-pull dynamic where one person is always chasing and the other person is always pulling away. If you've ever been in this type of relationship, you know how confusing, anxiety-inducing, frustrating, painful, exhausting, and just unfulfilling this relationship is. The dangerous thing about this type of relationship is that it can have this like drug-like quality where we can almost get addicted to the high that we get when we do get back together again. And the reason this is so addicting is because we don't know when it's gonna happen. And so when it does happen, it's extra rewarding. And this is also exactly how gambling works. Someone in this type of relationship might describe that really strong feeling they have for that person as chemistry, when really that strong feeling was anxiety of anticipating when they were going to get back together again, and they might have just been misinterpreting that anxiety as chemistry or even love. People who are used to being in these type of emotional roller coaster relationships might even find relationships with stable, secure people boring. And this is one of those really annoying things that our brain does, is that it tends to seek out what's familiar and not necessarily what's healthy or good for us. If this sounds familiar to you, I do have good news for you. Our attachment styles aren't fixed. We're not doomed to have insecure attachment and bad relationships for the rest of our life. Our attachment styles can change, and it is possible to feel secure and have healthy relationships no matter how our caregiver treated us when we were babies. And that is exactly what I wanted to dedicate this video series to. I wanted to give you all the information that you need to shift towards a secure attachment and have better relationships. So I really hope that you found this video helpful and that you'll join me for the rest of the series. Next week in video 2, we're going to be going over the 4 most common lies about attachment style on social media, and I'm going to be giving you the truth. And then in video 3, we're going to be going over the proven strategies for shifting to a more secure attachment style based on everything we learned in the first 2 videos. Depending on when you're watching this, these videos might already be out, so I will link them in case you want to check them out. But in any case, as always, I hope you are staying well, and I will see you next time. Bye.